Wanted to say a bit more. Have you heard of raw food?
Yes.
Have you heard of living food?
Yes.
Well, this is the originator of LifeFood. Dr. David Jubb was Ann Wigmore's scientific advisor. Ann Wigmore, as you might know, is the founder of Living Food. And Dr. David Jubb was the scientific advisor for Ann Wigmore. He's been here in Norway for the past two months, and we've been in Sweden, in Stockholm, and in Ansbacka, and we've been making plans to go around Europe. In about 1 week we'll be in Paris for about a week, and we'll be doing some engagements there. After the presentation we'll be selling Dr. Jubb's books, a few of the supplements that we've described in the handout, and we'll be taking some names for people that would like to have a body reading. So today's presentation is the brain of the gut, which is Dr. Jubb's PhD specialty. And then tomorrow at 6, you will all learn how to read the body like a book. Dr. David Jubb, welcome.
Thank you. Well, I think this is the most amazing family, right, that's gathered here. It's possible for me to make sure that when you get up from your seat, you really feel like you've got to the bottom of some things. Yes? Are we in the right lecture, first of all? The brain of the gut.
Yeah.
Yes? Does it surprise you that it's possible that we have a brain down here? Yes. Might it surprise you, perhaps not, that most all conditions relate to blood flow through regions of the brain? And that's all? And various things that affect blood flow through regions of the brain. Is there anyone in neurology? Has anyone studied a bit of that? Like, is it? Today, of course, there's all sorts of bits of equipment and things, but you don't really need that. But the pieces of equipment show there's a single positron electron cartographic tomographic study. It's called SPECT. S-P-E-C-T, SPECT study. There's going to be a small exam after this. It's a single positron electron cartographic tomographic study, which is really a study of blood flow through regions of your brain, confirms what I've been educating people about for some many years in the world and in America. But my background is more as a neuro, meaning the brain, behaviour physiologist. I hope that's not too frightening. Names like that are crazy. Okay, but let's go. Will we go? We really do come from an environment, which is a lot like this. We could just imagine for a moment that we actually are in an environment like this, but we're all cosy, tucked in amongst the trees, and we're just listening because that was the way we primarily received information. More was from our auditory self. But if you're like me, I've often come as you are, sitting and listening, and I really care very much, it's possible to get to the very bottom of some things. So we're talking about the brain of the gut, and we're relating this to all sorts of conditions that arise behaviourally. You've got attention deficit disorders and hyperactive attention deficit disorders. We have all sorts of mild cases of Asperger's syndrome, and even some professions end up in that profession because they actually have Asperger's syndrome, like attorneys. But Asperger's syndrome is really where something behaviourally slightly is missing. A person can have sort of quite a wherewithal as far as being able to logically sequence stuff, but when it comes to coming into an elevator, imagine that you're the only person that's in the elevator, right? Elevator. But when you come into an elevator, you have to know where to stand, don't you? Yes. Well, it's only a certain spot. You're supposed to stand in an elevator. It'd be no good if there's only one person in the elevator and I'm standing over here. So, you know. So there's all sorts of intelligence that we have, and then there's a spatial and a kinesthetic feeling intelligence, which happens as a result of your ability to be able to pick up expressions from other people's faces when you're little. And so there could be degrees of short circuits that could have been occurring in the brain because of physiology of the brain and what's going on in the brain. So we're going to be talking a little bit about this, and I'm going to use some pictures to make it more stick, because I feel personally that I don't feel free myself, whilst others could be suffered, you see. And that is a bother to me. I've worked in all sorts of institutes and I'm a real civil rights advocate and quite outspoken as far as civil rights, and I'm very people loyal, not sort of product loyal for nothing, but I'm very people loyal. But we come from an environment more that's like this, so we have to imagine that that's really the environment we're supposed to have, really, but all square and straight, and everything's symmetrical, everything's stamped out by a machine, and then all the music 1, 2, 3, 4, which is 4 beat, which is very square, and you know there's a lot of pumping up, isn't there? God, so, you open up the car door and you turn the radio on, it's like you have to get pumped up. Oh, gee. Okay. But we're attracted by blue and red. That is the reason why when you go to 7-Eleven, you see more blue and red. Humans, we're attracted to blue and red. Green really doesn't attract us, It doesn't make us salivate, really. But blue and red does quite radically. But if you were a cow, green might really cause you to salivate a bit if you see, silage, or something. Okay, but we really come from an environment more where our digestive tract in somatotyping, which is an epistemology or investigation, a study of a hierarchical logical typing of information. Somatotyping is to do with information that relates to how our choice of food over eons of time has affected our digestive tract. And how does our digestive tract fit exactly into all the other digestive tracts of the earth? And this is called somatotyping. But in somatotyping, our digestive tract fits pretty much exactly into a frugivore's, and in botany, everything that comes from a flower, the body of a flower in botany is called a fruit. So cucumber's a fruit, broccoli's a fruit, cauliflower's a fruit, nuts are fruits, seeds are fruits, it's the body that comes from a flower. So everything that's like a nut or a seed is also a fruit and things. But we come from an environment more where it's more temperate relatively, and our environment where we evolve more or less is sort of an environment which really has a lot of fruit. Okay. And we start out already with various conditions, whether we're aware of it or not, and it doesn't get better necessarily over time. But as with children, it is interesting that 9 out of 10 children which are being drugged in the United States are boys, and so this which I'm sharing with you will fit quite nicely, because the reason why it's affecting boys more is because the blood-brain barrier is not protected until about 18 months of age for boys in their development, whereas the girl's brain, her blood-brain barrier is far more complete, whereas it takes about 18 months or so for his blood-brain barrier to become more complete. And during that period of time, nerves are growing from the spinal cord, or the base of the brain stem, growing up through to the neocortex, called pyramidal cells. So for his brain continues to develop, takes another 18 months or so. And during that period of time, the blood-brain barrier is not protected at all. So this condition which I'm going to be describing to you is something which affects boys much more radically than girls, and that explains what the reason is why you have a lot more autism and Asperger's syndrome sorts of conditions and things for with boys. Okay. Alright, I don't think we'll talk much about life food today, but you could just say that life food is food which has its life force, which you need to learn about more, but I'm not talking about that much today. Life food really is food which has its life force. So for instance, the telegraph pole could be raw, but it doesn't have any life force. So we're sort of distinguishing things which have life force versus things which don't. The moment you cook something, it's going to have no life force. But you could be beginning with something which does have life force and is a live food. But of course, the number one health food in the nation in America, when people are asked to vote, it is pizza. And Pizza Hut have done a very good job marketing their food. And so when Americans are asked, what's the number one health food in the nation, most everybody says pizza. And they're very eager about it too, enthusiastic. But the reason why is because Pizza Hut and all these companies, they said it's got your 4 food groups. This has got your 4 food groups. But it's full of opiates, which is the same as opium, and it's got strange undigestible proteins in it, the wheat does and the dairy does, which happen to be the 2 biggest drugs that humans are consuming on the earth at the moment. Okay. This is an example of a food which is dermot, or dead food, which even if it was eaten in its uncooked state, it is a dead food because it can't reproduce itself. This can't disperse itself or anything. It's lost all of its ability to reproduce itself. Humans are involved. It's an example of like what the banana is, the date, the carrot, the beet, the rice, wheat, oats, potato are examples. But most everything that we could consume that's vegetarian is live food, but not all food which is in its uncooked state is live food. So this has 26 strains of fungus in it. If you put that in a pot and you put live food with it, you'll see mold, fungus and yeast going to grow directly out of the pot. Christian Darling is a doctor here in Norway, sort of fairly well known in the world because he handed back in his license, didn't care to dispense poison to people, which I thought was very amazing. That here's somebody who really is willing just to say, hey, listen, I don't have informed consent, and I don't feel I can administer chemotherapy or these things to persons who have no informed consent as to knowledge as to what this will do to them. And so he handed back in his license. But you've got drugs also, of course, in food, and food probably is the major drug actually that people are consuming. So this has 16 strains of fungus. He did an experiment with just a burger, and it's 2 years old, and it hasn't broken down, not one little bit. It smells exactly the same, as when you walk in there. It still has this fragrance. And then people are using the same sort of fragrance that you use in shaving lotion, putting it in